All right, that sounds great. My name is Robert Joe. My pronouns he, him, and his. I am connecting from the traditional lands of the Tamien people in San Jose, California. And I'm a member of the Asian Pacific Action Team. Our team began in 2020. It's a space where we can foster an open environment for anyone interested in Asian American and Pacific Islander issues and its intersection with climate. Now I'd like to introduce our next wonderful speaker, Keely Lewis. Keely Lewis is a resilient and determined individual who has transformed personal adversity into a powerful platform for social and environmental change. After personal tragedies and challenges, including losing her parents during early adulthood and misogynoir, she retreated to a bus on a vacant inner city lot to heal and recollect herself. Inspired by her grandmother's wisdom, she founded the Temple of Utopian Hospitality, a matriarchal organization focused on environmental stewardship, ancestor veneration, and metaphysics. As an intersectional environmentalist, Ms. Lewis works to revitalize New Orleans through community-based environmental initiatives and advocacy for climate action through indigenous agroforestry and renewable energy solutions. She actively works to address climate change through the creation of neighborhood-based environmental resource centers, leading climate education efforts, and collaborating with our environmental justice organizations. And I just personally want to add, after getting to know her personally, I can definitely attest to her experiences and her fire that have forged her into the builder and restorer that she is. I could tell that one of the driving motivators for her environmental restoration work is the healing that it brings, not just for her community, but also for herself. We all recognize that the importance and urgency of our climate work can overwhelm us individually. And I think Keely's work exemplifies sustainability both for our environment and for our mental health. Please welcome Keely Lewis.
Thank you so much, Robert, for that warm welcome. Um, and I am happy to be with you guys today. I am appearing here from Balbanja, also known as New Orleans, and the land of many languages, the crossroads for many of the Plaquemine Mississippian nations, including the Choctaw, Chitimacha, the Homa, and the Biloxi Mississippians. I am happy to share my experience with you guys today about building the community that you need and embracing new partnerships. So, I carry many labels, and the easiest one to explain what I do is intersectional environmentalist. I found early on that with the work that I do, I wasn't necessarily just an urban farmer or even a religious leader, but I am one of those people who look at the world and try to fix things, including that with the environment, or especially. And when I think of environmentalism, I think that we have to be present in all arenas of life and industry sectors in order to speak on behalf of the environment and to impact change that way. So, we are going to talk about many things today, and I hope that I am able to make it through all of the presentation. We will be covering why would you want to build community, my story, and engagements and partnerships, because apparently I am really good at that, even though um, I don't believe that I'm doing much. So, and something to think about when we're building community. Oftentimes, I was told that you need to come to the table wanting to create community without any needs. Unfortunately for me, in my background, I've never been afforded that luxury. Building community around a like-minded goal is awesome, but that goal needs to also impact and help other people. So, for me, when I began my journey in building community, I found that I needed it for many different reasons: protection, recognition, support, and problem solving. Now, that protection came not only from the community members who were directly in my area, but also I needed to connect with people and learn how to sustain the lifestyle and also the well being of the community that I had created. I also found that I needed recognition because I used what I would call to what I would say are skill sets and a knowledge base that I grew up in, and then also things or experiences that I gained from firsthand knowledge. And not necessarily coming from a background where I have a college degree. I also needed support. We all need support in our endeavors and in wanting to create the future that we want to see or the world that we want to see. And it's really hard if you feel like you're in the struggle by yourself. And of course, problem solving. And it was kind of like a 1-2 punch for me because I needed to heal myself. And also, I found myself in the perfect situation where my community, my neighborhood, needed help healing or repairing from the adverse impacts of climate change. Being that when we had a simple um, rainfall, we would often have our streets flooded and impassable. So we had problems that we needed to work on, and healing myself actually allowed me the space to impact my community by creating green infrastructure. So we all have a unique um, story and a unique journey that lends to who we are and what we do. I would simply say that I am a community kid. My mom was instrumental in creating the community garden in my neighborhood where I grew up in back in 1983, back when the city of New Orleans, through Parks and Parkways, thought that a great way to help stave off the violence in our neighborhoods was to create community gardens where we could help as far as feed our communities, but also give us an outlet so that we can turn away from the guns and the violence. And quite frankly, in my neighborhood, it wasn't so much guns as machetes. Um, but that was what we came together and we did. And we also created space for the children in the neighborhood so that they had exposure to fresh food and also just activities that would branch off from the garden. When I found myself coming back home in 2008, I found that my community garden was not necessarily the one that I left, right? Our neighborhood had changed post Katrina, and we had a lot of new residents. No one knew each other, and quite frankly, the community garden needed more support than the neighborhood was given. And we actually set up a new structure for that community garden, and that being more so of a co op than just an open center for people to come and congregate and just speak about the community. Um, Over the years, I found myself working in that garden, cleaning it out, and we had lots of different challenges. And I myself had challenges simply because I was going through some personal familial problems, and this created what I like to say the perfect storm that landed me where I am today. So, where I come from. Um, my background is that of being a Creole person from Louisiana, and my family isn't originally from New Orleans. As we affectionately call it, we are from the parishes. And that means that our lifestyle and even our grounding to New Orleans is completely different and sometimes looked at as outsiders. I come from a background of both a multiracial Creole background and a Black Creole background. And my parents fell in love in New Orleans, and thus we were brought here and we made roots here. We have a strong Catholic background that I did not necessarily identify with because I did cling on strongly to my grandmother. And because of that, I learned about our unique history. And unfortunately, I could not find myself affording the grace that many others could to the Catholic Church. And that led me into studying the quote unquote pagan faiths and also just the red path. And that is just another way of speaking about indigenous American spirituality. And that that is what led me back to the garden, because when I came home, again, as I mentioned, I was going through it and I found that I could not maintain life. My grandmother always told me that unless you can um, grow a plant, then you can't really consider yourself an adult or even strong enough to sustain life outside of yourself, let alone your own self. So in 2008, I came home and I found that I was a reluctant elder. I lost my parents. Um, my mom immediately before Katrina, and I did not want to be that person. Um, I still wanted to be a kid. I had just turned 26 years old. And even though I had visited quite a few countries. I live in Europe and in Asia as an au pair and an exchange student. I wanted to come back home and have the sense of security of having my family home and having that support. And unfortunately, that was ripped away. and and I found myself struggling to maintain my family legacy, but also struggling because many times people did not understand my perspective because I am neurodivergent. So for me, my outpouring or my what they're calling now stimming in order to self soothe myself or just to help process what was going on was often misinterpreted by people. And because of that, I faced a lot of projection that made me not want to participate in the normal American society. Something as simple as a job was made even more difficult because people would assume things about me or even my facial expressions that were not true. And I would often find myself having to fight against these assumptions. And although growing up, my parents made it a practice to speak with me and ask me what was going on. Unfortunately, as an adult, many times people did not really ask me what was going on. They just assumed based upon what their own personal experience was. And so that did not usually land well for me. Also, I found myself in situations because I didn't have that security of a family home that I just did not find favorable, and I did not really know how to respond or to see myself within that situation or how that situation would ultimately be good for me or how I could springboard from one situation to the other when all of these quote unquote tragedies were just piling up one after another after another. So, um, the main thing and the main takeaway from this slide is let your smile change the world. Don't let the world change your smile. And that is so true for me. I found that the joy that I had in my heart, and I don't know if you can see that smile on my young face. Um, but I was always the happy child. I would always entertain myself. And everywhere I went, I would smile, I would greet people. And that wasn't a problem for me. That wasn't anything that I had to work towards being. I had a joyful heart. And I found that that joy that I was carrying or that I had known my entire life was being ripped away from me, and I could not stop that free fall. Um, a lot of people offered advice, and again, this is where that reluctant elder part comes in, because I had to learn to not only respect my experience, but also to respect my knowledge and respect where I came from. I've always been a spiritual leader of sorts, but I'd never taken the time to actually indoctrinate my beliefs in order to make sure that it was understood and to provide a pathway for other people to also grow, change, and then form a structure so that they could also live with a joyful heart while impacting positive change not only in their communities, but for the environment as well. And that is when I became a reluctant practitioner of civil disobedience, taking the leap and looking into my inner self. And so the leap came around 2018. I had been living in an apartment, and my landlord was not the nicest of landlords. Our relationship started great, but after 4 years, the conditions in my apartment were not equitable. And it was really hard just to get things done as like insect, uh, what is it, spraying. And then also when things would break, um, I couldn't get anyone to come and fix it. And I suspected that I had a lot of black mold, but my landlord wasn't interested. I was also working very hard, and more than 90% of my pay was going towards my rent and utilities, which really did not afford me a great positive of life. So I had the opportunity to purchase a bus and move onto this bus. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it exactly how I wished or how I had planned, because my landlord, once he realized what I was up to, he basically told me I had to get rid of my bus, and that it was not allowed to be around the property. So I moved onto a vacant lot that I had invested in as a tax certificate property, meaning I don't outright own it, but it was a place for me to land while I needed to heal. When I was there, I noticed that there was the problem of rainwater overflow. Three of my adjacent neighbors had built out buildings onto the entirety of their parcels, of their land parcels. So when it rained, all of the water would flow onto their roofs and then go into the vacant lots. And there were six of them, which had been vacant for quite some time, over a decade. And due to subsidence and the fact that the soil had not been worked, it was impossible for the water to be absorbed into the ground. So it would roll off into the street, and unfortunately, our catch basins didn't work properly. So instead of draining, what would happen is we would have a quote unquote lake effect where it would appear as though the houses were sitting in the middle of a lake. And this was at a major intersection where thousands of cars drive through every day, hundreds every hour. And whenever it would rain, no one would be able to drive past those streets, even though it was a main boulevard. And so at that time, I also found myself being kicked out of my childhood community garden. And so I turned my attention to where I was at the time because it needed to be remediated. And using the indigenous agroforestry skills that I learned at the previous garden, I was able to correct that problem. Now, I hadn't been ready to completely detach from society, so I continued working in the hospitality field. I did everything from bartending to managing bars and even working as a cook and doing temp work. And that was pretty challenging work. And I would say that I got to see an interesting side of society. Um, and at a certain point, I needed to step back from that because, again, I was losing my smile and that joy that I had in my heart just it disappeared. And I found myself considering being harmful to others. And that's never a good place to be. So I was very happy to be able to just withdraw completely from society and focus on building up this space that I was now calling home, and also meeting my neighbors because I needed protection. I was in the middle of the hood. And for those of you who are not familiar with New Orleans, Central City is known to be one of the most dangerous areas of New Orleans. And it's surrounded by, or was surrounded by, a lot of housing projects and also a lot of vacant houses, vacant and blotted houses that needed to be addressed. So I just got comfortable. And if you look at those pictures, you see the bus, and then you see when it's a green bus, that's the lot that I moved on to. And that is the area that I had to build up. Down at the bottom, you'll see a big pile of pea gravel. And what I did was I created a bioswale that was in that space so that when the rain um, fell off of the roofs, there was a good way for the water to be absorbed and somewhere for the water to go to. I also raised up the land, or rather the ground level, by over a foot in some places, but definitely where that pea gravel was, in some places over 6 inches, so that when it rained, the rain would collect in the gravel and then it would go back down into the ground table. Now, this also allowed for the soil there to regenerate. In addition to me putting lots and lots of wood chips and also composting in place using lasagna gardening in order to revitalize the soil and make it fluid and valid again so that it was welcoming and embracing of the water rather than rejecting it. So, the creation of the Temple of Utopian Hospitality and also the institute that also works along with it. I have one side that's focused primarily on our religious beliefs, but then also a 501c3 nonprofit to further the work that we do so that anyone who wants to get involved with environmental stewardship and learning the indigenous agroforestry techniques and also the transition to renewable energy solutions can get involved. So we create permanently embedded green spaces or pocket forest within a city. These pocket forests and green spaces allow a place for not only the water to go to, but it helps us with our reforestation efforts as well as, I'm sorry, uh, our reforestation as well as the green infrastructure, providing the water a place to go. Many people say that in 30 years, New Orleans is going to be 6 inches underwater. And part of the way that we can help stave that off is by using the very same techniques that help form the landmass that we have adopted and used in the city of New Orleans to create it. So we build up those spaces by using composting, using trees, using wood chips, and we build mounds, as someone told me. Otherwise, I did not realize just how much of an indigenous life I had been living until a lot of my community and my indigenous friends, they were like, dude, you're one of the most indigenous people we know, you're over here building mounds. And I was like, oh, yeah, I am building mounds. So we build mounds, we plant trees, we grow gardens. We teach people about how you can even build your own medicine or grow your own medicine in addition to your own food. And we try to teach them ways to live better, not only with water, but also within nature. um, the renewable energy solutions just came along because living on a bus, I'm off grid. So being off grid, I am not hooked up with electricity at all, not from Entergy or electric company. And I really feel bad running a gas generator because of the impact that it has on the environment. So, if we want more people to join us and help us with these solutions and to help us heal the environment, we have to provide them with enough creature comforts. And so that they don't feel like they're losing out, especially when they're decreasing their footprint by going into tiny housing solutions. So we provide those energy solutions so that they are not thinking about renewable energy as in, oh, this is our emergency backup power, but this is how we can live so that we have less of a negative impact on the environment by depending upon these major companies and corporations to provide us with our energy and the negative impacts that they themselves cause to our environment. Um, Additionally, we train people just so that they know climate smart solutions. So, community spaces filled with love. I mean, that's what I do. I believe in empowering people so that they can make the changes that they would like to see. And one of the things that I learned in my first community garden was that if you find problems and then you offer people solutions, they will also come in and find more solutions and ways to improve the space. So, my community garden, when we pulled out the carpet, because when I got there, it was loaded with lots and lots and lots and lots of carpet. We pulled out five. Five dumpsters full of carpet, and then we tested it and found out it was more than 400 times toxic as the EPA levels. So we began what we called the overhaul method or overhaul stage of our garden, which was we did lasagna composting, we put down cardboard, we initiated new plots, and that's when we found out that you can actually remediate soil by using fertilizer and natural fertilizers and natural techniques. We also put in lots of trees, and we had someone who wanted to put in a lake. So we put in a lake, and next thing you knew, we had a community space where people love to gather. But not only that, we even had events and support. Um, so this is the technique that I continue to use and practice now in my current space that I'm at. So we embrace diversity, and I'm going to try to speed it up because I say I'm going short on time. So we embrace diversity and we embrace the needs of everyone within our community. And that's why we always use the term utopian hospitality, because we want everyone to feel welcomed and supported in the endeavors that they choose to take. Um, and this is why we've branched off to even go into larger energy solutions like virtual power grids. So, through the garden and through the need to find credentials, because as I mentioned before, I do not have a college degree. I started looking for ways to get certification and recognition for the work that I did, and I came across CCL. Um, I took the climate advocacy training and I met Susan Adams, who is the Third Coast Regional Director, and she reached out and asked for help planning the first post COVID Third Coast Conference, which happened to be in New Orleans. And because it was in line with what I did, I just embraced the intersectional aspect of environmentalism wholeheartedly, which landed me in such places like going to water collaborative meetings, going to different community sponsored efforts just to learn more about what was out there and to connect with the different people who were there. And because of that work, they thought that I earned the title to become the chapter leader because I like making connections for the betterment of the environment. So I bring the solutions, but I also call myself the troublemaker because I am very much so a design thinker and I don't necessarily think of solving solutions with the given pathway that I am allowed. And that is one of the reasons why I have to build community as thoroughly as I have to, because there's no way that you're going to create changes like to our city charter to allow us to create living solutions that also provide a solution to our groundwater problem. Meaning the saltwater intrusion that we have coming through the Mississippi River. So I had to make friends or at least get to know the city. I had to get to know our police force. I had to get to know the leaders of the nonprofits, the movers and the shakers within New Orleans who are making those decisions. Um, we often talk about infrastructure, but oftentimes they are looking at accepted um, methods. And for me, I don't think about accepted methods. I think about how I can make things happen, period. Um, And one of the major problems, or one of the major things that we have come to, is that while the money often does come to New Orleans, we do not have successful programs. So the only way to make those changes or to be the change that you want to be is to become a voice, a strong voice as a community stakeholder to impact the change that is needed, not only with the community organizations, the nonprofits, but as well with the civic government, the state government, and also leading all the way up to DC on a national level. So, one of the things that I had to learn was to bring my inner diplomat. Um, Being neurodivergent, I grew up with a lot of rules that would help me mask, and it protected me greatly. And when I became an adult, I found that I wanted to really cast all of that aside. And unfortunately, that didn't work so well for me. So I found myself once again accepting the fact that sometimes we do have to mask and learn how to word our thoughts distinctively and also in a way that can impact further change without disenfranchising others. I like to leave people with a smile. Um, I also found that I had to widen my circle of influence. And coming from the background of someone who's been a community garden person for my entire life, but then especially since I came home, I realized that I had to leave that mentality behind of, oh, I'm just a garden leader, to also become a community leader and a community stakeholder. And that transition was not made easily. And I can tell you that initially I was not welcomed at the table. So I had to make space for myself and make sure that that was happening. Through that, I engaged multiple different parties. Um, and that has led me to being able to speak to not just board members of multiple city agencies or city committees, but also speaking with the police board or with the Office of Homeless Affairs, just so that we create better solutions that not only solve the problems that we have in the city, the societal problems we have, but also create solutions for our environmental resilience and sustainability, or as I like to say, create pathways for the regenerative adaptation of New Orleans so that we are here beyond the next 50 years. So, the partnerships that we have often include recycling and composting, and how those two different solutions should work together to impact greater change for the city. Oftentimes, when we think about recycling, we think about the things that we can't recycle. Especially paper products like pizza boxes, but those pizza boxes can alternatively be used for composting if you compost them within the right method. And also renewable energy, because oftentimes in New Orleans during hurricane season, or even sometimes when we have really extreme cold, we will lose our electricity. And in order for us to create a more stable society and help residents with their bills, because oftentimes, again, our electricity and our water bills are beyond compare here. We have to provide solutions for people so that they do not leave our city, because we need people here. We want to have a thriving city where people see opportunity and don't just see where their lives and their quality of life is being detracted from. And one of the ways to do so is to invite our community stakeholders to the table and enlist their help in solving those solutions, and make sure that they can see themselves reflected and that they feel heard in that process, which is not something that we often hear from our community members currently in New Orleans. Um, I always say that there are multiple alternatives to the things or the systems that we have been taught or raised within. And it's finding those alternatives and ways to support those alternatives that people want to actually embrace, rather than disenfranchising our communities, which are already not seeing themselves reflected in our government or reflected in the community based solutions that are being quote unquote brought to the table. Because then you take people that you're trying to help and you make them feel forced into accepting a solution where they don't see themselves reflected, seen, or heard. And that is how you get population loss, and that is how you see increased incidences of crime. We want to increase the city's gross national happiness. We want people to live here and not to feel as though it is a chore, but also see themselves in a way that they are not losing their quality of life, and that they feel supported supported in everything that they do. So, something as simple as making sure that we have mass transportation that reaches the outskirts of the city needs also to have an eye so that we can put up a community bus stop with shade and shelter, which we often don't have. But how do you have that shade and that shelter and make it comfortable? Well, you need to introduce renewable energy solutions so that we have shelter, shade, and also, if possible, backup electricity for those people in those communities when we do lose power and they cannot necessarily make it to a cooling center, which are not truly accessible throughout the entire city. And the key point is that we need to and we want to meet people where they are. And that means going out into the communities, going into the hood, or even going on to that Zoom call so that you can meet people where they are and see how you can help, how you can assist, or how you can get on with what they're doing to further impact change and also bring a greater eye to what they're doing and improving everyone's quality of life, not just a particular squeaky wheel. Because if the squeaky wheel is the only one that gets oiled, then the rest of the bus or your vehicle might fall apart. Wow, that wheel is completely being quiet. So, the main thing that I want to remind people is that you need to think about the community that you want to create. What kind of community would you like to build? Where do you want to be? Oftentimes we don't realize that the world that we live in, the societies that we live in, they started with someone else's mindset, right? For every little thing that we do, every little system that we have, there was someone who thought of it. There was someone who sat down, put pen to paper, and then started speaking with people in order to impact change. So, in order for us to impact things environmentally, to impact people's quality of life, we need to start imagining and revisioning how we get there. And we need to do so in a way that everyone feels heard and not dejected. All right. You shouldn't wait until you're frustrated like I did. I waited until I was frustrated. And yes, it provided awesome results for me. But oftentimes, those people who wait until they're frustrated and act negative or bad situations on others. And we shouldn't wait for things to get that bad. We should start seeking out those things that spark joy within us, and then try to make it possible for others to also enjoy that spark, that environmental good that we're doing for the betterment of society. I always say we're all Captain Planet. I'm a Gen Xer, and one of the biggest cartoons that I watched was Captain Planet. And I always like to say, you know, we're all planeteers. Saving the environment is the thing to do, you know? So we all need to take part and we all need to help and we all can impact change. But we need to start at one place, stick to it, and then share those results and create a wider scope of influence so that we can also help others while we are trying to help ourselves. So, this quote was one that was selected and suggested for me. And that's no matter how educated, talented, rich, or cool you believe you are, how you treat others tells everything, tells all. And integrity is everything. And this is so true. I find that in a society where we're not necessarily holding people accountable for their actions and the impact that they have. And this is very much so true when we think about our government, when we think about our nonprofits. We need to make sure personally that we maintain our integrity, but also our dignity and allow others to maintain their dignity. And by doing so and reaching out to others with a smile and with a hand to embrace and help them, we can circle around and build and widen our scope and build a brighter environmental future for all, and hopefully impact our climate change goals so that we see a greater push to healing the planet before 2050, but hopefully by 2035. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Keely, for sharing that wisdom, those experiences. It's such a wealth of knowledge and your passion.
Well, well, thank you. I hope I got everything down. I mean, I'm always one of those bouncing around people. So I hope that my message was heard and I hope that it was able to help others.
That's great. I guess, yeah, we have some time for some questions now. And the Q&A looks like there's a couple questions there. I guess the first one is by Ashrith, and Ashrith asks, what is the greatest challenge that you've faced in the New Orleans chapter?
Well, honestly, the greatest challenge I face with the New Orleans chapter is having people show up. A lot of our interactions are because of all of the various pots that I have my fingers in. I find that CCLers are very quiet and stealth. Like everywhere I go, I find CCL people that I did not expect to find. And that is how I actually engage my members. Um, I send out text messages. I also send out emails. But most of the time, it's when I meet them where they are, which is a city council meeting, which might be a speaking engagement or a panel at a university. It is oftentimes at these committee meetings that I will find CCLers and they just announce themselves to me. And I'm like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. So you're the one who's like, it's more like they come up to like, I've been getting your emails. I haven't responded. And I'm like, oh, awesome, great. So now that I have your attention, when are you going to come out and when are we going to do things together? And oftentimes, I pop up and I will support them at their organization's work. So, like, oftentimes I might go and help with a garden party or help establish a garden for ABCXYZ organization. And this person belongs to CCL or that person is NCCL. So it's more like we're working cooperatively, and I guess I'm the stealth person who is leading people and just making sure that I do what I can to not just support them, but to also uplift their messages and the work that they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. It all goes back to those relationships. Treating people is a sort of like a reflection of like who you are. And just like going back to sort of that last slide that you went to about no matter who you are, how you treat people tells all, and your integrity, of course.
Well, I can honestly say, like, one of the organizations that I work with, and I feel so honored that they allow me amongst them, is a General Honoraries Green Army or the Louisiana Green Army. And they are a bunch of environmental justice activists who really blow my mind away, right? They are deep in the trenches. We're talking about the Banner Sisters. We're talking about people who are doing permanent reforms. We're talking about people who are going to see the president, who are I get to sit there and listen to all of the work that they're doing, but I also get to bring that information back to CCL so that we know what they're doing and how we can also uplift their message, right? Because that's all about community too. And I like to think that my role is not necessarily being the forefront of CCL, but more like making sure that we uplift the messages of those people who are already doing the work and making sure that they get help to further continue the work that they're doing. Because we have a lot of environmental organizations here in Louisiana. We're the belly of the beast, Cancer Alley. So you don't need to rewrite a will. Like, I don't need to rewrite what we're doing. I just need to support, uplift, and also just benefit them as much as possible.
Absolutely. We've got another question in the Q&A by Tamara. Beautiful story, Keely. Thank you for sharing so lovingly and authentically. How did you make space for yourself when there wasn't initially space, as you mentioned?
Oh my goodness. I got angry. I got angry and I allowed myself to take up space. I wish I can say that, like, um, it was one of those things where, like, I was like all nice about it, but um, what had happened is that I was told that they wanted community input, like community stakeholder input, in order to help find solutions. And I found that I was really offended when I came to the table and they only wanted me there for a snack. They only wanted me there for one meeting, right? But they did not want to include me in the solution, right? They wanted that insight, but they didn't want a community stakeholder actively participating in creating those solutions. And that made me angry. And I went out and I found a way to make myself valid in those places where I was being denied um, my dignity and a long term seat at the table. Hence my intersectional environmentalist work.
Wow. Yeah, there's definitely just and that's why we're here after all today. We're here as part of the inclusion conference, and I just hope that we've been able to make space for plenty of people as well.
I
Um,
feel like CCL is very good at making space. And I'm sorry, I know we have to go, but I do want to put in this last plug. CCL is very good at making space for us. But not only that, too, for uplifting us and empowering us, right? And that is the only reason why I'm still here today doing all of the work that I do. Because when I met Susan, my regional director, she made it immediately known to me that the work that I did was valid. She made it known to me that the work that I did was worthwhile and needed. And she also made it clear to me that I simply needed to have more tools and to be myself and just widen my scope and go out to people, which is something that, being neurospicy, I was not wanting to do. I became a hermit. Come on. I became a hood hermit at that. Like, that's how many people do you know decide to go into one of the most abrasive places that you could find in order to get peace of mind? But that was where I was at. And coming out of that after healing and then making those connections, I just wanted to, make a difference, make an impact. And CCL has definitely empowered me to do so and given me the tools that I need to widen my scope, but also learn how to embrace others and receive others, not only with dignity, but with the grace that has not always been afforded myself.
What a outstanding hour. Thank you for your wisdom, for sharing your story with us. Uh, yeah, it was just the right thing that we needed to hear. Thank you so much. You're getting love in the chat.
Thank you. I'm gonna go back afterwards and look at them all, but I'm trying to
Yes.
maintain my concentration and be present.
Thank you so much. You are welcome to stay with us for the rest of the afternoon if you have time, of course. But just wanted to again thank you for being with us. I know you have work to do over at the Third Coast Regional Conference.